A mechanic saved little twin girls and their mom from a burning car next morning. Helicopters filled his farm. The October sun was setting behind Dale Brennan's farm when he decided to take the long way home from town. At 58, Dale had learned that rushing through life only meant missing the good parts. His pickup truck rumbled along the old county road. Flannel shirt sleeves rolled up despite the cooling evening air. The radio played an old Johnny Cash song, and Dale hummed along, thinking about the grocery list Margaret used to make every week, even though she'd been gone for 3 years now. That's when he saw the smoke. A silver SUV had veered off the road about a quarter-mile ahead. Its front end crumpled against an oak tree. Orange flames were already licking up from under the hood, and Dale's heart seized in his chest. Without thinking, he pressed the accelerator, yanked his truck to the shoulder, and ran. Inside the vehicle, a young woman in her early 30s was frantically trying to unbuckle her seatbelt, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't get it to release. In the back seat, 2 little girls with blonde pigtails, maybe 4 years old, were crying, their small palms pressed against the windows, their identical faces twisted in fear. "The door won't open," the woman screamed through the glass, pounding on the window. "Please, help us. My babies. Please." Dale grabbed the driver's side handle and pulled with everything he had. The impact had jammed it shut. The flames were spreading faster now, black smoke billowing up, and he could feel the intense heat against his face and arms. His mind raced through possibilities, the same way it did when he was working on an engine that wouldn't start. He ran to the back door, positioned his boot against the frame for leverage, and yanked with both hands until he felt something give way. The metal groaned and protested, but finally the door flew open. "Come on, sweetheart," he said as gently as he could manage to the first little girl, his hands working quickly to unbuckle her car seat. Years of fixing engines and farm equipment had made his fingers quick and sure, even under pressure. He lifted her out, her little arms wrapping around his neck, and handed her to her mother, who had finally freed herself, and stumbled out of the front seat. Then he reached for the second twin, who was sobbing, calling for her mommy. "I've got you, honey. You're safe now. I promise you're safe." He unbuckled the second car seat, lifted the little girl into his arms, and the 4 of them stumbled away from the vehicle. They made it maybe 20 feet before the flames engulfed the front seats with a whoosh that sent heat washing over them. They collapsed on the grass, coughing, trembling. The woman pulled her daughters close, all 3 of them shaking, tears streaming down their faces. Dale sat back on the grass, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. His hands were scraped and burned in places, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was how close it had been, how those beautiful children had been seconds away from something unthinkable. "Thank you," the woman whispered, looking at Dale with eyes full of gratitude and shock. "Thank you so much. I'm Sarah. These are Emma and Lily. You saved our lives, Dale Brennan," he said simply, trying to catch his breath. "You folks, okay? Anyone hurt bad?" They had minor scratches and bruises. Nothing serious, considering what could have happened. Dale called 911 with shaking hands, stayed until the fire trucks and ambulance arrived, gave his statement to the police. Sarah kept thanking him, over and over, but he waved it off the way folks do in small towns. He wasn't comfortable with gratitude, never had been. "Just glad I came along when I did," he said. "You take care of those beautiful girls. How can I ever repay you?" Sarah asked, holding her daughters close. "No need," Dale said quietly. "Just hug those little ones tight tonight." He drove home as darkness fell, hands still shaking slightly on the wheel. His farmhouse sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, weathered but solid, the way he'd kept it even after Margaret passed. The porch light was on, set to a timer because coming home to darkness had felt too lonely. He made himself some coffee, sat on the porch rocker that needed fixing, and watched the stars come out, thinking about how quickly everything can change. Margaret used to say that. Everyone gets moments in their life where they have to choose who they're going to be. Tonight had been one of those moments. He hoped he'd made her proud, wherever she was. The next morning, Dale woke to a sound he'd never heard before on his property. The deep thump, thump, thump of helicopter blades cutting through the air. He walked outside in his work boots and undershirt, coffee mug in hand, squinting up at the morning sky. Not one helicopter, but 3, circling his farm before landing in his back pasture, where he usually kept the hay bales. The cows scattered to the far fence line, confused and agitated. "What in the world?" Dolly muttered, setting his coffee down on the porch rail. A tall man in an expensive suit emerged from the first helicopter, followed by Sarah and the twins. Behind them came news crews with cameras, and more people Dale didn't recognize, all of them walking across his pasture like they owned the place. His first instinct was irritation at the intrusion, but then he saw Sarah's face, saw the twins holding her hands, and his expression soft. Sarah ran to him, the girls holding tight to her hands, their little legs working hard to keep up. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I had to find you. I had to thank you properly. You wouldn't give me your number, but I asked around town until someone told me where you lived. I hope that's okay." "Ma'am, you already thanked me," Dale said, bewildered by the helicopters and cameras. "What's all this about?" The man in the suit stepped forward, extending his hand with a confident smile. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Robert Chun, Sarah's father. When she called me last night and told me what you did, how you saved my daughter and granddaughters without a second thought, risking your own life, I knew I had to meet the man who gave me back everything that matters in this world." Dale shook his hand, still confused by the production. Any decent person would have done the same. "Mr. Chun, but you did it," Robert said firmly, "and I've learned in my 63 years that gratitude needs to match the size of the gift you gave me." He gestured toward the helicopters and the gathering crowd. "I'm the founder of Chun Technologies. We manufacture medical equipment, surgical instruments, diagnostic tools. When I heard your farm was struggling, that you'd been thinking of selling because you couldn't keep up with the repairs alone since your wife passed, I wanted to help." Dale's throat tightened. He hadn't told Sarah any of that. She must have asked around town, and people talked in small communities. Everyone knew his situation, how he was barely holding on to the place he and Margaret had built together. "I can't accept charity." "Mr. Chun," Dale said quietly, his pride rising up. "Despite his circumstances, it's not charity," Robert replied. "It's gratitude, and it's an investment in good people. I want to fund a renovation of your farm, modernize your equipment, help you hire the workers you need. Consider it payment for saving 3 lives, for giving me the chance to watch my granddaughters grow up." Little Emma tugged on Dale's hand with surprising strength for such a small person. "Mr. Dale, Mommy says you're a hero." Dale crouched down to the girl's level, his weathered face softening in a way it hadn't in years. Up close, he could see they had their mother's green eyes, bright and full of life. "Sweethearts, I'm just a mechanic who knows how to open a stubborn door." Lily, the quieter of the two, touched his cheek with her small hand, so gentle it made his eyes sting. "You saved us. Mommy was scared, and we was scared, and you weren't scared." That's when Dale's composure broke just a little. His eyes grew damp. He thought about Margaret, about how she'd always said his good heart was his greatest gift, even when times were hard and the farm was struggling, and they couldn't afford the things other people had. "Your mommy and granddaddy are very kind people," he said to the girls, then stood to face Robert and Sarah. "I appreciate this more than you know, but I have one condition, and it's not negotiable." "Name it," Robert said without hesitation. "Part of whatever you do here. I want to set up a scholarship fund for kids in this county who want to learn trades. Plumbing, electrical work, mechanics, carpentry, honest work that helps people and builds communities. In my wife's name, Margaret Ann Brennan." She believed in helping young people find their way. Sarah wiped her eyes. Eva Robert looked moved. "That's beautiful, Mr. Brennan. Consider it done." Over the following months, Dale's farm transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. New equipment arrived on trucks, modern tractors, and tools that made the work easier. The barn got repaired and reinforced, painted a fresh red. That reminded him of when he and Margaret had first bought the place 30 years ago. The fences were mended, the irrigation system upgraded, the farmhouse roof replaced. He hired 2 young men from town who needed work, Jake and Marky, teaching them about engines and crops and the value of showing up every day. Even when you didn't feel like it, they reminded him of himself at that age, hungry to learn, eager to prove themselves. The scholarship fund helped 6 kids in its first year, and Dale personally interviewed each one, telling them about Margaret and why she'd believed so strongly in the dignity of working with your hands. But the best part, the part that truly brought life back to the farm, was the friendship that grew between Dale and Sarah's family. The twins started calling him Uncle Dale after their 3rd visit. They came to the farm regularly, sometimes just for the day, sometimes staying a weekend in a newly renovated guest room. Emma loved feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, while Lily preferred sitting quietly watching the birds, learning to identify them by their calls. Sarah and Dale would sit on the porch in the evenings, talking about loss and healing and second chances. She'd lost her husband 2 years earlier to cancer, and she understood the particular loneliness of being a young widow, trying to raise children while carrying grief. They found comfort in shared understanding, in not having to explain the hard parts. Robert visited too, more often than Dale expected for a busy CEO. He'd show up in jeans and work boots, genuinely interested in learning about farm life, asking endless questions about soil, quality, and crop rotation, and what it meant to work, land that had been in Dale's family for generations. "My father was a farmer in Taiwan before we immigrated," Robert explained one afternoon while they mended a fence together. "I went into technology, made my fortune there, but I always missed the connection to the earth, to growing things. You remind me of him, Dale. Same steady hands, same quiet strength. I'm just doing what needs doing," Dale said, uncomfortable with the comparison. "That's exactly what he would have said," Robert smiled. One Saturday in early summer, Sarah brought the girls for a visit and found Dale in his workshop, teaching Jake and Marcus how to rebuild a carburetor. The twins ran to him immediately, chattering about their week at school, showing him drawings they'd made of the farm. "Uncle Dale, can we have a picnic today?" Emma asked. "Please, in the big field with the yellow flowers." "I think that sounds perfect," Dale said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your mama pack a basket." "We did," Sarah said from the doorway. "And I made your favorite fried chicken and potato salad." They spread blankets in the meadow where wildflowers grew tall and golden. The twins ran through the grass, chasing butterflies and making flower crowns that kept falling apart. Jake and Marcus joined them, young enough to remember the joy of running for no reason. Sarah and Dale sat on the blanket, watching, comfortable in their silence. "You know," Sarah said eventually, "I almost didn't drive that road that day. I usually take the highway, but Lily had been fussy, and I thought the scenic route might calm her down." Funny how life works. Margaret used to say, "There's no such thing as coincidence," Dale replied. "Just moments we're meant to be part of." "Do you still miss her terribly?" "Every day," Dale said honestly. "But it's different now. Less like drowning, more like remembering. You know what I mean?" "Sarah, nada, I do." That's a good way to put it. They watched Emma try to teach Marcus how to make a proper flower crown, her little hands patient and determined. Lily had found a beetle and was showing it to Jake, who pretended to be impressed. "They're good with kids. Your guys," Sarah observed. "They're good young men," Dale agreed. "Just needed someone to believe in them." Jake's father left when he was 12. Marcus grew up in foster care. They understand what it means when someone shows up for you, like you showed up for us, Sarah said softly. Dale didn't respond, Just watch the twins playing, their laughter carrying across the field. He thought about the night of the accident, how close he'd come to taking the highway himself, how different everything would be if he had, not just for Sarah and the girls, but for him too. They'd given him back something he thought was lost forever, a reason to look forward instead of backward. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma and Lily ran back to the blanket, breathless and happy. They climbed into Dale's lap without asking, the way they always did now, settling against his chest like they belonged there. "Uncle Dale," Lily said quietly, "are you happy?" It was such a direct question, the kind only children ask. Dale looked at Sarah, then at the twins, then out across his farm, where everything was growing and thriving again. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I am." Emma hugged him tighter. "Good. Because we love you." Dale's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. These children, this family, had somehow become his family too. Not replacing what he'd lost, but adding something new, something he hadn't known he needed. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in deep purples and golds, after the twins had fallen asleep on the porch swing and Sarah had carried them inside to the guest room, Dale and Robert sat on the steps, nursing cold beers. "You know," Dale said thoughtfully, "when Margaret died, I thought my life was winding down, just waiting out the clock on this farm until I couldn't do it anymore, then selling to some developer who'd turn it into subdivisions." "And now?" Robert asked. "Now I remember what she used to tell me. Life isn't measured by years or even by what you accomplish. It's measured by moments that matter, by the connections you make, by showing up when someone needs you." He smiled, looking at the fireflies beginning to dance in the yard. "Thank you for showing up, for all of this." Robert raised his beer bottle. "Two moments that matter, and two people who show up when it counts," Dale added. They clinked bottles, sitting in comfortable silence as the night settled around them. Inside, Sarah was reading a bedtime story to the twins, her voice drifting through the open window. Jake and Marcus had stayed for dinner, and now they were playing cards at the kitchen table, arguing good-naturedly about who was cheating. Dale looked around at his farm, at his home, at this life that had been dying and was now somehow blooming again. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as ordinary choices. Sometimes saving someone else's life ends up saving your own. And sometimes, when you think you have nothing left to give, you will discover you have everything that matters. The Marguerite Ann Brennan Scholarship Fund would help hundreds of kids over the years. The farm would thrive and eventually expand. Jake would go on to open his own repair shop. Marcus would buy land of his own. And Emma and Lily would grow up visiting Uncle Dale every summer, learning about hard work and kindness and the kind of love that shows up when it's needed most. But on this particular night, none of that was known yet. On this night, there was just a man on his porch, a cold beer in his hand, fireflies dancing in the darkness, and the sound of children's laughter drifting through his windows. After 3 years of silence, his house was full of life again. And that was everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Stories about kindness and the unexpected ways we find connection. Leave a comment below telling, "Was about a time someone showed up for you when you needed it most," or when you showed up for someone else. Your story might inspire someone today who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need reminding that one moment of courage can change everything.